but we're getting there.
Very true. Well, I've been at Consensus 2022 this past week, so I was talking to a lot of people about TreeTrunk and about the mainnet launch and what's to come at NFT NYC as well.
Were they ranting and raving?
They were indeed, and a lot of them will be at NFT NYC, so hoping to see a lot of familiar faces there. And it looks like we've also got Richard Jacobs.
Hey.
Back.
Hi, Richard.
Technical difficulties there.
No problem at all.
Well, we've made it. I'm curious. I would love to start the conversation today with you, Robert, kind of talking about, I'll ask similar questions. So, Richard, the same question to you, but kind of how did you get into the blockchain space as an artist? How did you, hear about it? How did you start experimenting with it with your own art?
I'm curious. What space? I'm sorry.
With the blockchain, like with NFTs and
blockchain.
So yeah.
I'm actually, this is kind of like my first foray into it. So I was connected through a good friend who lives locally, and it's interesting with artists because I think sometimes we're a little hesitant because I think we're a little scared maybe. But as we started discussing it and working through it, I thought to myself, like, this is a really nice extension of everything else that I'm doing. So I have my paintings, that are in galleries. And then for a long time, I'd been asked to do prints and editions, and I didn't want to do that either. And it took a long time to convince me to do it. And then that became like another really nice passive revenue stream. And it became a way for collectors that are much younger and can't afford a unique piece of art to step into buying. So this is kind of like another layer to the whole puzzle.
No question. No, I felt that way as well, where it gives me access to new people, but also it's like it's something new for us as well. But Richard, same question. How did you kind of immerse yourself in this blockchain space, and how did you get introduced to TreeTrunk?
Well, I started during the pandemic listening. Someone turned me on to social networks, like Clubhouse was the first one. And I started listening to what was going on out there, and there was so much positive energy around this. And I had been using my cell phone as like a sketchbook, taking pictures of my paintings in progress and, digitally enhancing and reworking them. And so I was already sort of making a step towards, digital art. And I actually kind of took my time figuring out, how can I use basically 40 years worth of images that I've been taking of my work in NFTs. And it was really kind of an interesting process. And when I got confident about it, sort of around the same time, serendipitously, I met a team of young guys out of Seattle, a company called Mage. And really, it was interesting because they didn't have any background in art, and I didn't have any background in this technology. And they became really enamored by my work, and I became really enamored by what they were doing. So I did a series of 100 one-of-ones. I was just like crazy going into it. There was actually 111 of them. And I went to NFT NYC to a party, and they told me about this word called whitelist, which we're all now calling allow list. But it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Everybody that I talked to and said, would you like to be on my whitelist, was like, absolutely. Before even looking at my art, they were signing up to buy it. I was like, what's going on here? After 40 years in the art world, where no one really wants to even talk to artists when you're at parties like that. Everybody, was into it. And the other thing was they were all younger than my kids. I was meeting these like crypto millionaires, and, some were tens to hundreds at that time, back in December when everybody was rolling. And people bought like multiple.
As we call them now, crypto thousandaires.
Yeah. But, I was really, and then I went down to Art Basel in Miami, which I've been to before for my paintings. And it was almost like they turned the lights off on the art fair, but the crypto world and all of the NFT stuff was like thrilling and exciting, and everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid, and everyone wanted to meet me, and everyone wanted to get on that list. And so the it was like, I've never sold 100 works in a week. When they went live, it was like nuts. But it wasn't really, for me, it's always more about the work. Like, I'm just I've always wanted to create inner light in my work. So working on a computer, it's like the light is the backdrop of the work. And that to me is a really cool way of creating color and light. And so I've just been completely into it as part of my practice, and now the NFTs are informing the paintings. But you asked how I met these guys. A friend of mine who's a Hollywood agent called me up and said, you got to meet these guys. And as soon as I heard the word cryptolithography, the hair stood up in the back of my head, because I have a background in doing lithography, and I was like, that is very cool. Plus, I had heard Ira, and it turns out I was a big fan of, a family member of Serena's, and like everything sort of kind of came together, so it's very interesting.
It's really cool to
that.
have.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, Robert, both of you guys are working artists. I mean, you make a living on your work. And I think before NFTs and irrespective of them, which I love. And I think we have we have mostly people on the OG and the GA artists that are going out that are basically that way. This is quality work,
right?
Which is exciting. Forgetting about like the froth of crypto and found money and what that's done to put more food on the table, at least up until recently, certainly, and still, I mean, it's still happening. How do you make a living on your art, regardless of all this stuff?
Do you want to go, Richard, or do you want me to talk first?
Your turn, Robert.
Okay. So it was a lot of years of building up, right? So I spoke yesterday about my background. Went to school for illustration and graphic design at Parsons. When I graduated, I worked in advertising for a little while, which I found not to be my thing. Then I moved out to LA and I work in skateboarding, which was completely my thing, and I was able to use illustration and graphic design, doing everything from t-shirt graphics to board graphics to catalogs. And so kind of what happened is I just started doing work out in Portland and showing in galleries, which I think is an easier spot to start showing in galleries than New York City for sure. And around 2005, I decided it's time to move back to the city. New York was my home. And so I moved back and just started building from there. And I think that the big change is when you have galleries that represent you full time. So before that, I had galleries that would give you a show, and then maybe 2 years later, they would give you a show, but they never had your work in the interim. So the big change was when galleries started having your work on a wall, specifically in their, one part of their gallery all the time. And then
what caused, I mean, what was for you, everybody's got a different story for this, but what was the snap that went from where you were struggling and to where galleries were carrying you without having to beg them to do it?
It must have been about 2008 or 9. So 2008, obviously everything sort of turned upside down because of the housing market. I was still working a day job, making artwork on the side. I had a few galleries representing me. And it sort of turned once I signed with this Boston gallery called DTR Modern. So they were in Boston. They opened up in New York City, right in Soho. They had a gallery in Palm Beach and DC. And that was the big turning point. That was where I started getting monthly checks. And I thought to myself, this is much different than what I've had in the past. And if I could find 2 more of those galleries that would do that, I think that I could make this work. And sure enough, from that gallery, other galleries came through. So I signed to a gallery in Laguna Beach. Where else did I sign? Houston and Dallas. And that was kind of the huge turning point where suddenly I was making more money on my art than I was at a day job. And 3 years later, 2 years later, 2011, I decided time to go, time to do this. And it was the perfect time. And it's been 11 years, and I have only done this for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
What was it, a particular piece that hit, or was it just build up of reputation? Or, I mean, what was the kind of tittering that was going on behind the scenes that do you suspect?
I think it was having a gallery that was demanding work. Not demanding, that's not the right word. That was asking for work every month, saying, you know, we're selling these things. We need more. We need more. And at the same time, I'm sitting at a desk, you know, being a creative director going, this is not what I want to do. Like, I'm thinking about being an artist. I'm thinking about doing something that's for me. And it's sort of, my brain space shifted. And I just went full speed in one direction.
What I'm hoping is that what will happen for artists going forward is, irrespective of the kind of coin go up, you know, buy an NFT because it'll be worth more later kind of thing, which isn't new. I mean, you know, art has done that for years, right? I mean, you know, everybody waits for the artist to die. So,
I know, right? Or they actually try and kill them.
yeah, exactly. And that would be at the basis of a pretty good movie. So you know, but if you know, a collector, and especially a notable one, you know, can say, hey, to a gallery, hey, not only should you be looking at this artist because I own a piece, I want you to put this print in your gallery because I will get royalties from it. That It adds to the impetus of them pushing the work with a gallery, and that I wonder if that snap goes faster for quality artists. I mean, you know, if you're terrible, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, because it's so new and the art world as a whole, there's not really a lot of regulation, right? So I have many galleries, and each one of them kind of deals with artists differently. You know, I'm fortunate that all my galleries are trustworthy, and you know, we have all the signed paperwork. But if something sells, you know, 30 days later, I get a check, which is really nice. But I think it's just kind of we're doing this right now, right? It's kind of the first time I'm doing this, and so we'll have to see and navigate our way through as we go.
One of my favorite things about having artists on actually just speaking to artists, is that you get this beautiful backdrop most of the time behind the artist that has their artwork. Can I ask what piece is behind you?
Behind me is something I'm working on for a show in November. It's Marilyn Monroe piece. The show is in Australia, and apparently she's still huge there.
Wow.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
And what about you, Richard?
I started hand printing monoprints in Bali, monotypes, using leaves from the jungle. But this one I did in Vermont when my daughter's boyfriend started growing weed in our backyard. I couldn't believe how big the leaves were. That's my hand next to these. So, you know, as most artists do, you just sort of filter everything in your world into your art. And speaking of Bali, it's kind of funny the way I'm sitting right now. You know, men walk around with flowers in their ears, and it's kind of, I'm kind of feeling. And in the paintings, like the gods always have these sprays of flowers coming out of their heads. So I'm kind of feeling that, which speaks to my life story that I'll try to make quick. I went to art schools also, the Cooper Union in New York, and then Yale Graduate School. But I ended up taking a different direction. I won a scholarship, a Henry Luce scholarship, to paint in Bali for a year out of Yale, and all my illustrious friends and roommates went to New York, and I went to the other side of the world. And it's had an effect on my whole life. My wife and I started a jewelry business from there too. So I've had sort of this dual, you know, creative world where when I first came back, all the work I did in Bali, I lived in Boston. Also, I had galleries there, and it was I'm in most of the museum collections there. But not only was I having a couple of art shows a year, we got picked up by one of the television networks to sell our jewelry. So the next thing you know, we had 2 kids. We moved to Vermont, and we were doing jewelry presentations all over the world, and grew this ridiculous business. You have an artist. Neither of us ever took a business, class, and suddenly we had 50 people working for us here, and like hundreds of artisans around the world doing our designs. So I was actually able, after a few years, to just take a break from the art world, build my dream studio, and just keep painting, both here in Vermont and in Bali. And it wasn't until our kids grew up that I kind of jumped back into the art world. It actually had to do with technology. Instagram came along, and I was like, that really looks like a slide sheet from the 90s, when I started putting my work on. And next thing you know, I've got like museums and galleries and collectors, interested in the work. And so, one of the big collectors actually has a museum in Vermont, the Hall collection, which is really amazing if anyone ever gets up here. And, I had my first show in New York, and coming back from that, like almost 20-year hiatus, was a sellout show in downtown. And I guess that, I came back with like a different attitude. I think even just when I got to Bali, I got a different attitude about art than a lot of artists. I do things that I do prints in snow that melt within an hour. I'm just really interested in art for art's sake. And when people sort of catch up to the work and it sells, that's great. But I'm not really chasing the market or even chasing the NFT market the way I hear other artists, kind of out there shilling. It's more like I'm trying to do really quality art digitally and hoping that it rises to the top or near the top of what's out there when it gets out there. And, I guess I'll always sort of have that attitude that when the artwork's done and it goes out, it seems like that's when energy comes back.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that it's one thing about artists is that as we travel through the world, we keep our eyes open. We try and absorb whatever it is. Like if you're in Bali, if you're in Boston, if you're in New York, you absorb everything that's around you and sort of, I guess, compartmentalize it. And then from there, make art that sort of reflects that. And I think that that's the interesting thing about artists is that, you don't have to be in a big city to make art. Certainly there's pluses to being in a city like New York or a city like London. You have the art world around you. You have art galleries, you have museums, you have culture. But that doesn't mean to say, you don't have to be there to be influenced by something and then make art.
Well said. I have a question for the two of you. Richard, I'll ask you first, but answer in whatever way feels natural to you both, whether it's a financial perspective or a creative perspective. If a newer artist or an artist who's struggling in their career were listening right now, or if I was that artist, let's say, and I were to ask, what would be some words of advice that you would give that have kind of helped you during the more difficult parts of the journey? How would you answer that?
I think the most important thing is to be true to yourself. I mean, in the end, if you're trying to jump on some kind of a bandwagon, and you're not really, interested in a real way in what you're doing, it shows, and it's kind of funny. Like, I might get accused of some of that because I've put punks and apes and things into my work, but I was kind of looking at it the same way Robert looks at, at celebrities and stuff. Like, who are the icons of our time? In the last year, the icons of our time have been punks and apes. So I kind of did my take on that, and so you'll see them throughout. I just finished a series of, over 1,000 animated pieces, and, maybe 15 or 20% of them have some of those elements in them. Some of them have, also portraits of, musicians and people that inspire me. A lot of self-portraits, some of these leaves. I mean, it's like whatever's sort of filtering that day. But it's because that's what I was interested in at the time. So that's my perspective. And really, you got, if you get off that track, it's hard to get back on. I think the other thing is, just because something sells, you don't have to become that person who just only does that work. Again, like if you get bored, it's going to show. So that, for me, the idea is to just constantly surprise myself, and I just figure if I'm surprised, maybe I'll surprise somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think by putting limitations on yourself, that's bad. That's stifling for an artist, right? I would always tell younger kids, like, first of all, you have to make 10,000 paintings, right? Don't think that you're going to make 25 paintings and you're going to be selling a ton of work and you're going to be getting galleries calling you, because it doesn't really work like that, right? You just have to be passionate about what you do, and you have to keep your eyes open and absorb the world. And there's times where I'll do something completely out of the ordinary, and you could say it's a failure if it doesn't move forward, but it's something that helps you move forward, and so, yeah, I always tell kids, like, you're not always going to sell art, right? The art market's weird, and there's times where things sell and there's times where things don't, but you're here for a reason, and that's to make art. So, if I wasn't making money making art, of course I'd have a day job, but what would I do at night? I would make art, because that's the thing that I love. It's the thing that drives me, and I think maybe for a lot of the younger kids, they don't get it yet. Like, they feel like they should be a famous artist at 25, and that doesn't exist, right?
I had a
The way you
directing
become a
teacher.
famous artist is, one, you die. But for us that are working artists, like, you do your thing, and so perfect example was during the pandemic. Like, I came straight to my studio because I think we were all, we're all floating, right? What's going to happen? What does the world look like? Am I going to die? Is my family safe? And for all those worries, we definitely drank enough during that time to try and alleviate that. But a lot of it was being in the studio and saying, you know what, I'm going to do an abstract body of work, because it's something that I wanted to do forever and could never really figure it out. And I sort of just shut off the way that I was making work before that and said, what does it feel like right now? What does my brain feel like, right? And so I started painting these almost abstract expressionist, sheets of paper, and cutting them apart and then configuring them. And so it was like I let things go crazy, and then I tried to bring it back in and make a painting with it, and I'll still do those paintings every once in a while, but those paintings informed what my work has turned into. So I feel like with artists, it's always a growth, right? You always have to be looking forward, and throw some hot pink in there. Does it work? No, maybe not, but it will lead to something else, right? And I think for artists, like, we look for discovery. Like, when you start doing the same thing over and over again, it might be great because you're selling it, but it's not great because you're not growing as an artist. So, I think there needs to be a healthy balance of selling work and making the work that sells, and then trying different things.
I had a directing teacher years ago, 35 years ago, that said, the only people that should be in the theater are people who cannot not be in the theater.
Yeah,
it's,
totally.
It's the same thing with art, right? If you're an artist, if you can't not do it,
Yeah.
Right. If you cannot do it, the economics would say don't do or don't try to make a living at it, at least.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's something to say. Yeah.
I've been mentoring a kid who's a teenager and one of the sort of top selling NFT artists. And it's kind of crazy because it's like, he's a child star from Hollywood or something. The kind of pressure and energy on the kid, like they roll in a Ferrari and tell him to paint it, and it's like crazy because he has no life experience yet, and that's what you have to bring to your work. So,
yeah, I worry about people that get lucky early, whether it's entrepreneurship or whatever. They think it's because they're talented or smart, and they don't realize yet it's luck. And the talent and intelligence are table stakes.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great kid. He has talent and potential. He may end up being one of the great artists of his time, but he also has to live a life, and that's what we bring, That's what we Robert and I look kind of like brothers with our great.
I know. I do have my glasses, but I'm not wearing them.
But what we bring to it, hopefully is a little bit of wisdom and the ability to sidestep the sort of mean girls mentality out there of everybody wanting to be in a cooler group and then looking back the people who want to be as cool as you and thinking, whatever. I mean, it's like, it's kind of, there's a lot of psychological issues out there. And then you couple that with, I basically, all the ETH that I piled up from my sales is gone, all the money gone. But I know enough at this point. I've been through years where I didn't make any money. It's like, just stick to the work.
Well, I think that actually, so yesterday, Will was hosting a Twitter space, and we were talking to Crypto Jeweler on there. And one of the things we were mentioning was how we were in the bear market, and how, NFTs and art are not the same thing. But the fact that artists are prolific and they continue creating and doing what they love to do and trying out new things. But ultimately the art is not stopping. So, yes, we may be in a bear market, but that's not going to stop the digital art that's coming out. And
Right.
After we're out of the bear market and we go back into a bull market, that art is still going to be there.
Well,
so
I like what you said, that it's the digital art that matters, right? The digital art isn't going away because it's art. Speculating on digital art will always be a kind of a gambler's affair, right? Whether you're speculating on art or you're speculating on digital art or calling that NFTs, it's all really they all need to go to Gamblers Anonymous. And so the question is, I mean, look at Ethereum does work. I mean, the Ethereum has utility. It does a job, right? And it's not just in service to whether a coin goes up or down. However, that job may or may not, and this isn't, any comment on or financial advice or anything like that, but you could question whether or not even the current valuation is based on wholly on the utility of the job it does, and whether a lot of it is still, hey, I think it'll go up, right? But it's no different than a stock. When the stock ceases to be connected to the value that the company is providing, then you're into inevitable bubbles. And whenever you make $1, you should say, I took that from somebody else. Somebody else lost $1 because they're gonna buy high and then it's gonna blow. And so the question is, what is the value of the work itself? I mean, I was just tweeting today. You've got to buy things that based on at the price that is value that matches the value for you, right, and not based on somebody telling you that somebody else will buy it from you for more later.
Well, the other thing too is I think Robert and I have found a niche here with TreeTrunk, because you guys are developing a program right now that's focused on real art. And, people aren't like buying a toad when they buy our work, like maybe they're buying something that they actually can appreciate, that they can have an experience with every time they open their wallet, that can grow with them, that they can use as, their background, their computer, not necessarily their, PFP or whatever. And one thing I found, from the 111 pieces of mine that went out, I think only 2 have been resold. I'm not a flipper, at least not yet. It's not like a thing. I think people buy certain art or NFTs for the art, and so that'll be an interesting test. I think it's like it's where I belong anyway. Is to say, hey, I wish I had punks and apes, in my wallet. And I appreciate, all of that and what you have. But I also really love the fact that everybody keeps saying, but when I get to yours, I just want to stop and look at it. And I noticed this and that and the other thing. And, that's cool because that's an art experience.
Yeah. And that's someone buying the art for the art, right? I mean, I think we get this quite often from people like, what is my investment? And it's hard to say, right? Like, you know, I could die tomorrow and my art could be worth nothing, or I could die tomorrow and it could be worth a lot. Like there's no law, you know, that says this is going to happen. But I always tell people, like, if you like my art and you connect to it, that's the biggest thing about art, is it's a connection, right? It's a human.
What do you think I'm buying, Robert? I mean, am I buying Patreon style? And Serena, I mean, you and your family have been collecting for generations, I think. You know, maybe you can comment on this as well. What am I buying? Am I buying Patreon style? Like, I want to support this artist. Like, I appreciate the work and I want to make sure that they have food on the table so they can make more. Is that my motivation? Or is it, I mean, clearly there's some people that are like, this is going to be worth more later. Or is it something about the statement that is it about the message? What is it that catches the zeitgeist is the question, I guess.
Well, I think there's a saying, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's something to the effect of, you know, how long did it take you to create this piece of art? And the answer is
Whole life.
You know, this isn't something, it doesn't matter if something took 10 seconds to make, it's everything that comes before it, right? So when we were talking before about someone who's 24 years old, it's hard for that person to go out there and have a worldly statement because they haven't traveled the world. So
well, but they could connect. They could connect with a moment, though, and that's. I mean, I think that's where both younger and older artists, or you know, experienced or less experienced artists, hit or miss. Right, is whether they're connecting with a moment. I mean, that was Warhol. That's Banana nailed to the wall. Why am I forgetting his name?
I don't even know what his name is.
Catalan.
Oh, Mauricio Catalan. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a banana taped to a wall, but it was saying something. And Matty Moe, right? I mean, Matty, you know, Matty Moe would be the first person, and he's going to be at the launch, and he's going to be on TreeTrunk. Yeah. He doesn't even make pretensions that his work is the same kind of work that yours is, but he is connecting. He's making a statement, and I think it's a profound one, and it's very provocative. So, you know, there's value there too.
Right. Yeah, I think so. You know, I always just say to people, like, look, I hope that you don't buy this just with the expectation of selling it at a profit, right? I mean, I can tell you that, like, I am in museum collections, like I am in private collections, you know, I make a living off of this. People pay quite a bit of money for the work. But I can't tell you, like, you have to enjoy it, right? The whole idea of art is that it's supposed to be enjoyed. And so, you know, it's frustrating when a lot of these pieces get sold for 180 million, 150 million, and then no one sees them anymore, right? They get put in a private collection somewhere. They're not in a museum. I think the best thing about art is that it's shared with the world when it hits a museum level.
I think it should also challenge people. You know, I think great art is like you're not 100% sure, maybe ever, you know, how much you like it, how much you hate it, how much you know, but you're having experience with it.
Right.
Well, yeah, Salieri was arguably a better composer for the day, but he didn't change the form. Mozart died poor, but did. Right. Yeah. So, you know, and I should think that there's something to that as well. I mean, was it Tchaikovsky? People like ran from the house, and some people threw up and hated it. And of course, any kid today listens to Tchaikovsky is like, it sounds like classical music. You know, doesn't even see the innovation that occurred and
I mean,
subversiveness.
Picasso, Mademoiselle d'Avignon, the you know, initial response to it was so bad he turned it to the wall for like a year. It's like that. I mean, Guston, his late work was, you know, he was vilified for it. So yeah, usually we're a little bit ahead of the curve. I had a problem with that with our jewelry too, because, you know, I hand drew like 5,000 designs, and sometimes it would get no traction at first. And then I'd see like 2 years later, everybody copying this thing that I invented, you know, because they weren't ready. It wasn't time, you know. And so there's some of that too. But so I guess the other part about that is that you kind of create, if you raise the bar like that, sometimes it takes the collectors a little bit longer to catch on, but they have more of an experience with it. You know, they have a lot more long-term experience. And that's the hard part and the gratifying part is, when people say, man, I've been living with that for, 2 decades and it's still, the light hits it and I'm like, oh my God, it's completely changed, like having a whole new experience. And so that's hopefully the gratification that we're putting out there, not just, that's what another, I don't even like selling my work, even in NFT form. It's like, oh my God, that's not mine anymore. There's always this transfer of energy, which I think is really important. If it doesn't sting a little bit, to let go of something, then it probably shouldn't be out there.
I wonder if art shouldn't be like a little bit like music, where you're making the music, but then you're selling the posters, the CDs, and the concerts. I mean, maybe when they've got marijuana already, so when psychedelics are legal, then you just like, here's my art, and here's some psychedelics to enjoy. And it's kind of like it's kind of like a bar, right? You go for but they're making the money on the drinks, right?
Yeah.
But I already have like all these great relationship stories with collectors of the NFTs, that I didn't know when they bought it, but I've sort of reached out and become friends, or somebody that I did know that didn't, like this one guy wrote it on Twitter, his name was T-Bone, and I was like, imagining this, some guy from, the South, or something, and it turned out it was a relative of mine. I had no idea had bought the work. So now I call him T-Bone every time I see him. But, it's really kind of funny that it's still about that, there's still about our energy is now your energy. You've now defined yourself and your world by, kind of becoming part of our world. And that's the most meaningful thing, because, the money is here and gone, right? The work is, the object of love is gone. If somebody isn't enjoying it, the whole thing is kind of goes up in smoke. So you really want to have that, that's probably the great, benefit or, thing about being an artist, is that your work and your energy is spread out around the world.
Yeah.
Richard,
It's your legacy, right?
I
mean, it becomes kind of like your children that go out in the world and like live a life.
So both of you guys are working on physical work, and then you have the work that's in the that's digital in the NFT, and then some of it you're digitizing, right? So I know, Rob, you've got a really good photographer that does your digitization, which I think that lots of those guys ought to be getting into things like TreeTrunk, right? Because they could then have the OG print, or they could have at least you say, hey, I'm going to shoot you your work, and I'd like one of the first gens, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder if this is a way to do it, like especially for Robert. You're trying to you've got to bring your fans from IRL, from real world art, into this other thing, right? And I wonder what ways are you because you've got people that buy your work for real,
right?
Today, so how are they going to come along on this journey? I wonder if one thing is you actually could do this like an algorithm that says, all right, however many prints are sold by such and such date, the higher up the print is, the more likely it will be the one that will be selected as the actual original that I'm going to send you.
Right.
But it's kind of a roulette table, right? Or a roulette wheel. You say, I'm going to spin the dice. You have a better probability, weighted average, higher up you go.
Right.
But those are more expensive. But anybody could get it.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's one way to bring along real world art, or IRL art.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about that because of the era in my work. Oftentimes, it's people who are in their 60s, and maybe they have a harder time because it just changes so quickly, right? So I'm even not technologically advanced anymore, as my kids are. They're the ones that know more about my phone than I do. And so it'll be interesting because I think it will be a sort of like a learning lesson as well to people who have collected my art for years. And here's a way to step into something else, a different part of what I'm doing. And I think it will be an education to them, because it's like an education to me right now.
Yeah,
I
or
think
with the Discord server, this would take it more or less out of like any kind of gaming issue. And I'm not a lawyer; you'll have to talk to Ira. But like the more people comment on the work, the more so that way they're producing value. But that somebody's going to get that piece in the end.
Right.
Sorry, Serena, go ahead.
no worries. I was going to say what is great is is that you've already formed that connection with so many people. And I think even John, going back to your question of like why collectors even purchase the art in the first place, and I think it's that connection, whether that be to the artist or to the artwork. I think the connection can be formed in a number of ways. I mean, even like an emotional response. But whatever that connection is, that's the strongest point of that artwork to the collector. And yeah, it may go up in price, but I don't think that's the point of collecting. But when you have that connection, I feel like people think other people will also have that connection, especially when it's super strong. So, I think both of you were mentioning that connection with artwork, but I think that is there.
Yeah.
And then in the Web3 space, I was just going to say real quick, I think it's really refreshing because a lot of people have kind of been trying to change this from like IRL art. A lot of that is not conducive to the artists right now. And so, waiting until somebody is gone, that's not realistic. But also some artwork is ahead of its time. But for the artwork that, is for here and now, as well as for the longevity, I think it's important that we're uplifting the artists and that, the artists are a part of the conversation and not cut out of the conversation. But I'm seeing that as a shift in Web3. And I think that's so great.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's been great to meet, people that are so young and so sort of uninformed about art and have them be so receptive too. I mean, that's one of the really interesting things about this space, because, when I was their age, my collectors were my age. Now those collectors are like gone, so now my collectors are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And it's just amazing to watch them sort of grow and learn and be, excited about art for the first time. And, again, I think it has to do with the fact that, collecting just to collect, PFPs and stuff is one thing, it's fun, but sort of like the next level is what could be, more challenging and more interesting for their lives. And, that's where I'm really hoping that the whole TreeTrunk format, reaches out to a world that's beyond us. Like I put so much time and energy into my TreeTrunk pieces because I'm thinking it's not just one piece, it could grow into however many hundreds of pieces. And I don't want to make a mistake with this. The last thing I want is ever to have one piece come back to haunt me, never mind hundreds. So you guys would just laugh at how many iterations, went through. I mean, I can't deconstruct this work at all right now because it's, it's gone through so many forms before even past,
Hey, Richard, I don't want to make any spoilers, but are you going to do that triptych idea we talked about?
Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah. So I started it. It turns out Robert and I both wanted to try to do something that was, more of a movie format, more of an animated format. But it turns out actually that splitting them up into 3 pieces, I've come to like more. Because it gives you time to rest and look at them. The way I had them animated, you had to just keep looking at it over and over to really focus on one. And each one is so sort of packed with visual information that I'm glad now that they're separated. But I do want to do.
How are you going to do that? Are you going to do the thing that we were talking about where you like, is it going to be if you own one of the first gens in the centerpiece that gives you private sale rights to the side pieces, or how are you going to pull that off?
Would you do you really think after all these conversations that I might have decided until the last second? I'm one of those people at the restaurant that's like, okay, you guys order first, 'cause I'll figure it out by the time the waiter gets to me. that's kind of, I'm on the, I don't want to make it too complicated. So I'm not exactly sure. I want to kind of go the least complicated route, but I'm pretty excited about all three pieces. So I'm hoping that I figure out a way in all these conversations we've had that the original collectors will buy all three, because I really feel like, it's a lot to ask maybe, but I think that they belong as a triptych. They belong together, and I think collectors will see that.
Well, it's a good segue. I can, I always try to show something in these shows, that the users can learn from. So I can I'll share a screen real quick and show folks how to do a private sale. So in this case, I've got a seller's account over here, and I own these pieces, and I'm going to. And here they are on the marketplace, so you can see the ones that are available. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell. I own this one, so So I'm going to sell this one, or I'll sell this one here, and I'm going to put a price in here, and I'm going to keep it at parity. I'm going to say it's 0.05 ETH, and this will be default to this, so this is being changed. You can just click this reserve for specific buyer, and then here I'm going to go over here, and I can take this account and paste that into here and complete the listing. Oops, I'm in the wrong account.
Gas is crazy. It was about to cost you $100 to list that.
No, that was wrong. Yeah. So let's do this correctly. There you go. So listing, and yeah, there it goes.
There we go. Fraction of a penny now.
Yeah. Well, that's Polygon. So I'm listing this. This is, and I'm going to copy this this URL, and I'm going to send it over to my other guy over here, and I'm going to email it to him or text it to him or what have you, and then I'm just going to have him we'll wait for this to be available in the marketplace. These don't take that much time.
So John, if I were to make, let's say I was selling you something privately, and for whatever reason you decided, you know what, I can't afford it right now. Can you update that private sale for the same piece?
Yeah, all you have to do is unlist it. So you just you hit the sell, instead of a sell button, you'll see unlist when this is actually listed on the marketplace, and then you just hit unlist, and it'll do its thing.
Nice.
And of course, it's interacting with the blockchain, so of course it's taking time to do that.
Oh, nice! But it shows you all the steps at the bottom there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And you can always, with MetaMask, you could speed it up. I'm not going to, I don't think, in this case, but I could speed it up. But yeah, and then over here, I can just put that into thing, and as soon as it's not listed for sale yet, but when it is, I can buy it. It's as simple as that.
Wow.
And people can do that right now. So even though it's, yeah, so that's people can do that right now, and when we go to GA in next week, they don't really have to wait. I mean, there's already artists on there. Yeah, that's how. So Richard, that's one of the ways you could do that. Is you could say, well, kind of manual, but you could say, okay, anybody, here's the deal. You put it in your description. And you could say, here's the deal. If you the first gens, I'm only going to allow I'm going to allow lots of different centerpieces, but the two side pieces only go to. I'm going to make 10 of them, and they only those 10 pieces will. I'm going to private sale them to the first public keys that I get. the top gens, and you could just private sale them just like that. A little manual, but you could do it.
It's cool. I mean, I just think there's so many opportunities here that as we kind of grow as artists within this platform, probably come up with all kinds of new ideas to work on it. It's just jumping in the deep end the first time that's probably the most interesting.
Yeah, just getting your MetaMask account up and doing all that is rough.
Robert and Richard, when you all were coming up with your pieces for this first TreeTrunk drop, was it a different process for you for other project drops that you've had or other art that you've put out, or was it a similar kind of thought process as far as the art goes?
Do you want to go first, Richard?
Sure. I wanted them to look different for sure. First of all, my other ones are square formats. I made this one a tall rectangle. Kind of fit more art into it, I suppose. But they ended up using some of the same iconography because I want people to recognize them, and also because that was just naturally what I was working on. But I felt like they were sort of a next step. I've now completed 2 sort of major groups of work, and this feels like the beginning of a third one. Digitally, anyway.
Yeah, for me, I had a huge panel in my studio, 60 by 80, and so I chose to do that to sell the original, being much larger. Most of my work is 40 by 60, 48 by 48. So there was that selling point, because I don't do pieces. Normally, I don't do pieces that large. But the way that I constructed it was the same that I do my other work, with the exception of doing the time-lapse videos. So like kind of every part of the process, I did a little time lapse. It's about 30 seconds. And I felt like this came from a gallery that I show with. And when the whole NFT thing started popping up and we started having conversations about it, he said that he was offered a photograph of Mick Jagger, which wasn't a very famous photograph, but that the photographer had done a 30-minute interview with Mick Jagger that no one's ever heard. And he's like, to me, that was what I wanted, right? The ownership of that. And so I started thinking about that, like doing something behind the scenes where people could see kind of, how the pieces are constructed. I thought that would be more interesting to them than just a flat, file.
That's cool, man. I love that. And that's part of the reason I have all these Living with Will episodes for my interview series that I never will put out, for that exact reason. Because some of the people I interviewed, I'm like, even this video, like this will be worth money to people someday.
Yeah.
Robert Mars, Richard Jacobs, and Serena Chargunula in one place.
Yeah.
Pretty
Well, I mean, you think about it, right? Like, we are like Facebook. What is Facebook? Data mining, right? It's information, right? Like, and the people with the most information hold the most power. So as artists, like, it's not just about what you see on the wall, but it's about everything else. It's about the thoughts and what led you there, and part of your history. And like we were saying, like a 24-year-old doesn't have the I guess like the world maturity that someone that's twice their age has. And that's what a lot of it is. It just comes through living and having experiences and seeing the ups and downs, right? Like in 1999, when I owned stock and it all dropped, I sold it all. If I was 10 years older, I wouldn't have done that, right? Because you know that everything is an up and down, ebb and flow. And so it's just, it's wisdom, age and wisdom.
Very true. And will you both be at NFT NYC?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yep.
So excited. So for everyone watching, our TreeTrunk launch altogether is going to be on June 22nd at our launch event from 4 to 7 p.m. at Segoy, which is an event by Logic. So we are super, super excited. We'll have a bunch of artists there, including Robert Mars and Richard Jacobs. Hope to see you all there, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, please.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
And we're on the main net right now. So to everyone watching, also go on there, purchase some works. That's not me telling you to do it. That's just, common sense.
Parental
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Thank you all so much for today. This was an amazing conversation. I had a blast.
Thank you. Yeah, it was
Thank
really
you. I have to say, I feel like my tree trunk work is the best work I've ever done. And people who are like, say what they're not physical paintings. I'm like, it's my last artwork, and I always feel like the last one or the next one's the best. So I'm really happy with it.
I'm so excited to see it up on TreeTrunk. It's going to be awesome.
Same.
Yeah.
Have a good one, y'all. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching, audience.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to lead us out. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.